On a rain-slick highway in Oklahoma, a lone driver named Tyler pressed harder on the gas, chasing the flashing lights ahead. The storm made the roads shine like black glass, reflecting his headlights in long, trembling streaks. But as he overtook a truck, his tires hydroplaned, he had no control, no sound except the hiss of water. The car spun 3 times before colliding head-on with the divider, the impact folding the hood like paper. Inside, the stickman's head snapped back. His white circular face cracked like porcelain in slow motion. The rain didn't stop. It only washed the red streaks into the gutter, leaving the wreck glimmering quietly. 2 days later, in another state, a teenage couple took a midnight joyride in their father's muscle car. They filmed themselves laughing, unaware that the speedometer had just passed 130 miles per hour. A deer appeared for less than a second, enough to decide everything. The car struck it, vaulted into a ditch, and somersaulted 3 times before silence. The phone kept recording, capturing only smoke and one arm twitching near the shattered window. By sunrise, all that was left was a crushed car and the smell of burned fuel lingering in the fog. In Germany, an old rally racer named Klaus took his vintage Porsche for one final run through the Black Forest. The speed thrilled him until the steering locked at a sharp turn carved by tree roots beneath the asphalt. The car launched off the curve and split in half against a pine trunk, snapping like a matchstick. Locals say they still hear an engine roaring at night when fog covers that bend. Across the world, 1,000 such crashes end the same way, sudden, senseless, and eerily silent after impact. Because in the end, speed doesn't kill. The second after control is lost. It started as a calm morning flight over the Pacific, a silver jet slicing through clouds like a dream. But inside, turbulence whispered first, a gentle shake that made coffee ripple in trembling hands. The seatbelt sign blinked on, and laughter turned to nervous silence. In the cockpit, one pilot frowned. The altitude gauge was falling faster than it should. The airspeed indicator spun wildly as alarms began their shrill metallic screams. Outside, a storm appeared like a wall of dark cotton, massive, silent, waiting. When the jet entered it, lightning flashed so bright it turned every shadow into white fire. The right engine burst with a dull orange bloom, throwing sparks across the wing. Inside, oxygen masks dropped like white ghosts descending from the ceiling. A child's toy rolled down the aisle as the jet began to tilt nose first into the clouds. The pilots shouted commands drowned by wind, their cartoon mouths open in silent terror. Then the nose broke through the clouds and revealed only the black surface of the ocean below. For a heartbeat, the aircraft hung suspended, caught between air and gravity. Then gravity won. The descent became a scream that no one could finish. Impact shattered everything into white and gray fragments, then nothing but bubbles. For days, search teams found only luggage, pieces of lives still drifting where the waves whispered. Families stared at empty skies, wondering if clouds could remember screams. Because sometimes the sky doesn't take you home, it just keeps you. In 1979, a crowded passenger jet taxied out of Chicago's O'Hare Airport, its engines humming like thunder. Families waved from the terminal windows, unaware this flight would never leave the city limits. As the plane accelerated, one engine shook loose, spinning away like a flaming wheel into the grass. With one wing crippled, the jet veered sideways and tore across the tarmac like a dying bird. The left wing scraped the ground, slicing through a car park before exploding into a rolling inferno. Inside the wreck, passengers were silhouettes of heat and smoke, clutching each other, and only a handful survived, but none ever boarded a plane again. Thousands of miles away, another aircraft faced a different horror high above the Alps. At 30,000 feet, a cabin window cracked open with a shriek, sucking paper. The woman seated beside it vanished instantly, her seatbelt sliced through like thread. Oxygen masks flailed uselessly as the crew tried to descend through freezing white clouds. The frost formed on every face, white crusts of terror frozen mid-scream. The pilot's final words were a whisper, "We're losing everything." The plane vanished into the peaks, leaving only a red scar glowing on the snow that night. Rescue teams found the wreck 2 days later, frozen mid-descent like a monument to fear. They said the bodies looked asleep, hands still gripping armrests as if waiting for landing. Every pilot who flew past that range afterwards swore their instruments flickered near the crash site. Because some flights don't end, they just stay suspended in the cold air, forever falling. Tea began before dawn, when the 540 freight left the depot under a sky the color of ash. The metal wheels screamed on the rails, echoing through an empty valley that had never known silence. Engineer Clark wiped his fogged window, unaware the next bend hit a broken bridge. A signal light blinked red too late. The locomotive thundered forward, blind and unstoppable. The first cars left the rails, twisting like worms of steel before dropping into darkness. When the engine hit the riverbed, its boiler burst open with a roar that locals arrived to find wheels still spinning, like a beast refusing to die. Days later, cleanup crews pulled twisted iron and silent faces from the mud. But a month later in India, another train met its end in the middle of a monsoon. Floodwater swallowed the tracks until metal floated like driftwood. One car tilted and slipped beneath, its windows glowing pale as screams gurgled away. When rescuers arrived, the flood had already buried the line under 6 feet of silt. Survivors spoke of hearing wheels still turning somewhere below the water. In Japan, decades earlier, a bullet train derailed in a tunnel and burned for hours. The smoke had nowhere to go. It rolled back through every car like a living creature. By the time rescuers cut through, the fire had eaten even the seats. Only rails were left. Travelers say when you pass that tunnel, the air still smells of iron and ashes. Because when trains die, they don't stop. They just keep running, somewhere you can't see. In 1910, a passenger train near the Alps entered a tunnel and never came out. The signalman waited, but the lights never returned green. Only a dull red. When rescuers entered the tunnel hours later, they found no passengers, only empty seats and blackened walls. The steel rails had melted into twisted shapes, as if something had chewed through them. Some said the train slipped into a loop, a time pocket that repeats the same scream forever. In 1973, near the same tunnel, a freight train reported strange silhouettes standing on the tracks. The engineer tried to brake, but his hands passed right through the controls. Seconds later, the entire train derailed without touching anything solid. Investigators found the car split open, but no bodies, just luggage and torn clothing. Locals now call it the Hungry Tunnel, believing it feeds once every few decades. One night in 2005, a teen dared to ride his bike through the tunnel at midnight. Inside, he saw a flickering train ahead, transparent, packed with screaming faces. He turned to escape, but his bike tires melted into the rails like wax. The next morning, only the twisted frame of the bike was found. No sign of him. They say sometimes you can still hear a distant bicycle bell echo inside the tunnel. No one goes near it now except stray animals, and even they turn back halfway. On cold nights, the red signal light turns on by itself, pulsing like a heartbeat. And if you listen close, you might hear the train that never stops screaming,